Hello, everybody. I am so excited to talk with you today about my tarot deck collection. I'm also going to share with you the oracle cards that I have and what the difference is between tarot decks and oracle decks. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal tarot journey. So I know that for some people, tarot can be a little bit controversial. Like, is it against religion? Some people have even darker beliefs about the tarot. But for me, tarot is such a spiritual practice, and it goes right along hand in hand with the other spiritual practices in my life. And for me, it doesn't have any conflicting energies at all. So I think individually, we just have to figure out what feels right for us. But for me, it is such a tool just to pull from my own intuition and my own subconscious mind to really get to know myself better, but also to tap into the energy around me and to the energy in my own body that sometimes my mind doesn't know how to interpret, if that makes sense. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got started with tarot, what it means to me, and what my daily tarot practice is like these days in 2023. And then I have my whole desk here just covered with my large, I would call small to medium size. Some people have hundreds of tarot decks, so I'm not in that range yet, but it's beautiful artwork. It's a spiritual practice for me. So I'm going to share my decks that I have with you and which ones are my favorite. So let's get started on Spooktacular Day 7. So as a younger person growing up as a kid in South Georgia, Middle Georgia, and growing up very active in the church, tarot was not something that was really even on my radar, other than potentially seeing it mentioned as like a traveling fortune teller or something like that in a TV show or a movie on passing by. Like, I feel like it used to be common in movies that someone would go to a fortune teller and they would pull the death card and it would be like, you're gonna die, which is not at all what the death card means. And in fact, it's one of the more positive cards in the tarot deck, believe it or not. It's not one that I'm ever afraid of getting. But back then, that was the only thing I knew about tarot, was this sort of media portrayal of it as something that you would get from a witch or someone dark, or like a dark message or something like that. And I was still intrigued by it because I have always loved horror and mystical and, different things that are occult or whatever. Like, I was always interested and intrigued by those things because I'm a storyteller and I love fantasy and I love just diving into all the things that are different from our everyday world or to the everyday type of magic. And so I was interested in learning more about it, but I didn't really have any resources as a child to learn from it. And it was very much kind of like a forbidden topic around locally. And so I didn't really even think about it or engage in any way with tarot, learning tarot reading, even up through my college years. And it wasn't until after I had graduated from graduate school. So at this point, I'm 23, 24 years old, and I moved into an apartment for a period of time. I was working at the Melting Pot. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, which is also where I went to college. And my upstairs neighbor was a bit of a witchy guy. He was really more into sort of pagan and Wiccan type things and, manifestation and different types of meditation and different things like that. And I was really interested in what he believed and learning more about what his beliefs were. And one day when I was visiting them at their apartment, it was another couple that had a young child. And I was visiting at their apartment. He said, "Oh, do you want me to read tarot cards for you?" And I was like, I would love for you to read tarot, because it was something I was always interested in, I was aware of, but I didn't really know enough about. And so I had him read tarot cards for me. And it was so different than what I expected, because I thought it was like fortune telling, but instead it was really a tool for here's what's going on in your life, and like recognizing your own emotions and recognizing where it is you hope things are going to turn out for you, what your secret desires are, and all of this. And for me, it was immediately something I was drawn to, but I was also intimidated by. There's 78 cards, and I felt from the way that he was just pulling them out and knew what all these things meant, I felt that in order to properly read tarot, I needed to understand and memorize all the details of what each card could mean. And so he actually gifted me one of his decks, which was very kind. So I will always be thankful to him for that. And I started kind of looking through books. I checked out a few books from the library, but what hung me up for the longest time was I felt like I couldn't really practice daily tarot because I didn't know what the cards meant. And I felt somehow like I was cheating by looking through the book and trying to figure out what everything meant. I felt like in order to do it properly as a good student, I needed to memorize it. And yet memorizing it felt very difficult because there's just so many cards. So if you're not familiar with tarot, it's 78 total cards, and you have the major arcana, which are the first 21 cards in the deck. And those are the cards that you might see more typically in movies and things like that, like the Death card, the Wheel of Fortune card, the Fool, the priest, High Priestess, the Magician, those kind of cards. And then the rest of the deck is basically just like a set of playing cards where you have, in playing cards, you have like spades and aces and different stuff like that. So you have ace, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have the face cards like king, queen, etc. Tarot cards are exactly the same way. And I'm sure that playing cards came out of tarot in some way because they're so closely related to each other. And what I started to understand when I really got serious about learning tarot is that all of these cards are interconnected. So that major arcana that starts out the journey from 0 to 20, so you count 0 as the first card, and then 1, 2, 3 up to 20, is a journey. It's known as the Fool's Journey. And so it's really like a life journey that we keep going into cycles, and it keeps playing into this idea of where you are in your season of life or in this cycle of life. And then the individual rest of the deck, like each one of these things like pentacles, cups, swords, and wands, all have their own sort of energy and element associated with them. And then on top of that element, they all have those recurring cards. So you have the ace, and aces across all 4 suits mean something similar, but in relation to their specific element or their specific sort of zone of genius. So it's really made it a lot easier and more accessible once I started to understand those different kinds of suits. So I know this is something that we could cover in even more detail, and I don't want to go too long because I want to actually show you my decks, which I know is going to take some time. But that was how I first got into tarot, was through a friend, like my own interest for a long time, through a friend who shared a deck with me. And then literally years and years and years later of trying to learn tarot, but feeling like I had to memorize it and feeling like I was doubting myself, I finally met someone that really was able to teach me how to intuitively read the cards and not worry so much about memorizing, and instead develop a daily practice with the cards so that the more you use them, the more you learn them. And over a course of several years of having a daily tarot practice, now I know the cards pretty well, and I begin to have my own personal relationship with the cards and understand what they mean to me, which may not be the same that they mean on a universal level. And I think that has been one of the most rewarding practices of my life. So the teacher that I had, her name is Tanya Melendez. She has been on this channel a few times before. So I will link some of our previous episodes where she came on as a guest. And I will also link for you her Instagram. I don't believe that she teaches tarot the same way she used to anymore, but sometimes she does still do some tarot readings and things like that. She also has a YouTube channel here. So I'll link all of her information down below. And I went into an actual tarot study with her, and she became a private coach teaching me how to use tarot in my own life. And that is something I will never forget and I will carry with me for the rest of my life. As it is right now, I have 2 separate sort of daily tarot practices. For the past several years, I have been keeping a journal at night. So this stays by my bed along with whatever tarot deck I happen to be using that month. Sometimes I switch them out month to month, and sometimes I'll use the same deck for 6 months in a row. But I use I'll show you this when I do the top-down view too. I use what is basically a tarot journal. It's a planner, really, and I use it for my tarot journaling, and every day I draw one card. When I was getting to know the cards better, I was drawing 3 cards a day, just so I would use and get familiar with more cards faster. So I was drawing 3 a day. Now I just draw 1 in the evening, and as of this year, I also have a second now tarot journal that has my morning routine in it with my meditation and some of my other prayers and spiritual practice, like desires, my gratitude for the day, where I also draw a card in the morning. So now I have 1 daily tarot card draw in the morning along with my meditation and prayers, and 1 daily tarot card at night in this journal. And I keep track of what I've drawn for the year, and I keep track of what I'm thinking about it and how it means, like what I feel that card means for me in my life. And that has been a super rewarding experience. Now, if we get into what's the difference between a tarot deck and an oracle card deck, I'll show you here on the table. I'm going to put my camera facing down so you can see. But basically, a tarot deck is always those same 78 cards. So you always have a fool, a magician, a high priestess, an empress, an emperor. Those are the cards that are always there. Now, sometimes you'll hear pentacles called pinnacles, and sometimes they'll be called coins, or wands might be called something else. Like sometimes the name of the suits will change, but you'll always have like a 0, 1, 2, 3 or ace 1, 2, 3 and so on of that deck. So it is a set deck where you have the same cards in every deck, but the decoration or the artwork on the deck may be different based on the theme of the deck. Oracle cards, however, are kind of anything goes. There could be 52 cards, there could be 30 cards, there could be 70 cards, there could be 100 cards, and the cards will all be different. So you won't have the Fool and the Death card and so on. It's just whatever this particular person decided. So for example, one of my cards, set of oracle cards, is called the Moonology card. So each one of these, sorry, upside down, each one of these cards has to do with a different phase of the moon. So all of these cards have nothing to do with tarot, where you would have like an ace of pentacles and so on, because these are all like the quarter moon or the full moon or the new moon. And so that's the difference between an oracle card, which is just completely separate from tarot, and a tarot deck. I don't tend to use oracle cards as commonly, but there are some decks that really mean a lot to me. So I'm going to share with you everything that's on my table. So let's get started. I am so excited to share my tarot decks with you. So I won't have time to go through every single card of every deck, but I did want to show you just which decks I have and the basic idea of the artwork of them. I also wanted to share with you my journal, because this is a B6 size planner called the Sterling Ink Planner. And this is a Moterm cover. I got this off of Amazon. It's a leather cover, and I get to sort of stash my stickers and things in the back. I have the front decorated really nicely, and then I have a cover over this that has my name. So it's just really set up quite pretty, and I love it. And the way that this planner is set up is similar to a Hobonichi Cousin, which is what I used to use, where you have the months here by quarter, July, August, September. For example, this is a 6-month planner, and then you have a line per day. And I like to go in and write which card for the day. And you can see there's a couple of times when I didn't have a card because I was traveling, but for the most part, I put which deck I'm using for the month and then what card I pulled. And then in the weekly pages, you have a column for each day of the week. And what I do is I just take whichever card I drew for that day and I write down what that card means in terms of what's going on in my life, or just the actual meaning of the card. If I go and look at different blogs, or if I'm trying to get a deeper meaning of it, I'll go see what other people have said about it, or something that comes from the book that came with it. And I have been pretty religiously, I would say, keeping up with my daily tarot draw for the past 4 or 5 years at least. And then I also, in this particular planner, because I'm keeping a little bit more than just my tarot draw, I also have a habit tracker here of the kind of things that I want to do just to take care of myself, kind of like self-care stuff. So like getting up at the same time every day, making the bed, exercising, meditating, getting 7 hours of sleep, spending time with the family and things like that. And then I also have a lot of pages in here where I use stickers, and I basically just will journal about what that card meant for me that day, or just anything that has been going on in my life. So this ends up being a journal. I also keep any type of full moon tarot spreads or new moon tarot spreads. They all go in here, because for some of the special events of the year, like solstice or my birthday or other things, I will also keep full tarot spreads in this journal. And so now I have like 4 years of using a Hobonichi Cousin, and then this is the first year I've used this smaller planner, and I really like this one because the days in the back are not dated. It's just grid paper. And I like that because some days I don't feel like writing and some days I do. So this gives me a little bit more flexibility. So I have purchased another one of these for next year, and it comes in 2 books, January to June and then July through December. So the deck that I have currently been using that is one of my favorite all-time decks is the Golden Universal Tarot. And this tarot deck is, in terms of the artwork, based very much on the original Rider-Waite tarot deck. So like this is the same like traditional full that you would see, but there are some slight differences in the artwork. And the other thing is that the whole thing is gold foiled. So this has been one of my favorite tarot decks that I've ever used. And I love the gold foiling, but I also love the traditional nature of it. Now, one thing you won't find with this is really any diversity. Like all the characters here are white characters, and it's just the kind of traditional way that this was first drawn. So if you are looking for something that has a little bit more like cultural representation or a little bit more diversity, I have some other decks that you might enjoy. So this is the Golden Universal Tarot. Speaking of the Rider-Waite Tarot, I don't even use this really anymore, but this is one of the first ones that I bought, and I got it just at like a Barnes and Noble, which if you didn't know, you can get tarot decks at bookstores, you can. A lot of decks will come with a booklet that will teach you a little bit about each of the cards. And sometimes they will say specifics about how these cards are drawn and how it might be different from other decks. And sometimes they will tell you what it means when it's upright versus when it's reversed. If you draw it and it comes out reversed like this. The way that Tanya taught me to read tarot, I don't really read reversed cards versus upright cards. I just try to draw the intuitive meaning to it to see if it feels like the shadow side of the card or not. But some people will read it very literally upside down or not. And some tarot decks, in terms of their booklets, will give you very distinct instructions there about that. So this is the like OG sort of most popular of the original tarot decks, which is the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. So when you see imagery in a lot of things about tarot, this is typically the deck and the artwork that you will see. And so it's got kind of that old school style to it. And like I said, I don't tend to use this deck very often, but I do own it because it was one of the first decks that I learned on. One myth that you will often hear people share, or I call it a myth, but some people believe that it's true, so it just kind of depends, is that you cannot buy yourself a tarot deck, that it has to be gifted to you. And I personally do not believe that, because if anyone wants to learn tarot and use tarot, they can just buy their own deck. I bought many of my own decks, and I've never had any kind of bad thing or I can't read them or anything like that. So this deck is called the Mythical Goddess Tarot, and it does come with a booklet that I know I have kind of around here somewhere. Let's see, it's like this bigger, slightly bigger booklet. This deck is different, and I wanted to show you kind of an example of how some decks are going to be different. So all of the major arcana in this are named after mythical goddesses from different mythologies, like Native American mythology, Greek mythology, like very different, just across like a heavily diverse group, all female goddesses, even Mary Magdalene, for example, and so on. Then the suits are not like wands and pentacles. They're more like wind and fire and things like that. They're the actual elements. So this one is a little bit different. So all the purple cards are the major arcana. And so the third still says the Empress, but it says this is based on Kuan Yin. So if you wanted to work with a deck that has ties to the tarot, it still is a tarot deck, but that can teach you a little bit more about goddesses in history. This would be a good one. So this one is Empress Kuan Yin, the Mother of Mercy. Here's the weeping of the world, and it will tell you kind of where this comes from in mythology and where, you know, where that hero is from or where that goddess is from. And the artwork on this is really beautiful as well. So this is a much more diverse sort of feminine tarot, and it has more of that sort of elemental tie-in. So there's an Egyptian priestess, so you can kind of see the way some of those look. And most tarot decks is similar to a playing cards, where that you'll have one design on the back, and then all of the front of the cards is where you see the different actual cards themselves. So I'm not pulling these necessarily in any order, just sort of like as they come to me. And I don't even think I have every deck, because I know of some decks that aren't here. And so I'm like, where are they? I'm going to have to go look, because I think I haven't really found them since we moved in here. So hopefully they're not lost. We'll see. But this one is called the Wild Unknown Tarot. And I believe that this deck also has a companion oracle card set that has animals to it. But this is like, this one doesn't say cups, but you can tell from the imagery that this is the 4 of cups. And this is the Ace of Cups, which it actually says. And then here you have, again, rather than using the traditional page, knight, queen, king, this one uses mother and just some different types of terminology. So that is one thing. Mother, son. Yeah, so mother, daughter, son, and father. There's a lot of animal imagery in this Wild Unknown, and it's very like, almost looks like it's drawn with colored pencils kind of look. This is one of those decks that I really wanted, because there's a lot of really cool imagery in it, but at the same time, I have never fully connected with this deck, and I'm not exactly sure why, which might be a good sign that I should gift it to someone, but I haven't been wanting to let it go. But it's just one of those that every time I've pulled it out, I haven't felt like the readings particularly resonated with me. And this is where I truly believe that sometimes it's just your energy touching the cards. Sometimes we connect with certain cards because of our energy, and some imagery and energy doesn't necessarily connect as well. Another one that I love, so this one I have connected with and used quite a bit. This is the Everyday Witch Tarot. And this again is a slightly more diverse set of tarot cards. It also is a little bit more gender fluid, I would say, if you're interested in that. But it's also really cute because it's all witches, which of course I know you guys will love, but also almost every card has a little black kitty cat on it, which I also really like. So here's what the back of the cards look like with the witch hat and the broom and the stars and the black cat. And then here's kind of a look at the artwork that's on these. And I really connect with this artwork, and I think it's really beautiful. Like, I love this with the panther in the water, like your shadow, and then the witch across the side here. But all the witches are not female. And some of them are a little bit more gender ambiguous. But I think that this is a really cool deck, and I have really, really loved using this deck. And so I highly recommend it. I also feel like some decks have better guidebooks than others. And this one has a particularly good guidebook, partly because it will explain, it has the picture of the star or the picture of the card, and then it has like a little saying about that card. And then here it tells you very clearly what the imagery is on the card and what it means, as well as things to consider when you draw this card. But then it also has a place for notes. And I did have a few instances where I started to write into the notes, but I will say the biggest problem with this book in particular, if you want to use the notes section, is that if you use gel pen like I do, these pages are too glossy and everything started to get smudged. And so if you use this, I would recommend that you use a pen that doesn't smudge on glossy paper, something like a Sharpie, like fine point Sharpie pen. But it is cool that you've got these really good explanations of the cards. And then in the back, you have a little bit of guidance about what you could use these cards for: a 1-card spread, a 3-card spread, the Celtic cross spread, and what that would mean. So this is one I would recommend for beginners, is the Everyday Witch. This is a tarot that I picked up when I was in New Orleans. So this is called the Witches Tarot, and I honestly have not used this one as often, so I probably should pull this out. Maybe I'll pull this one out for November. It's a really beautiful deck, but you can kind of tell I haven't used it hardly at all. So you've got the triple moon here, and then the cosmos. And then on the other side, you have what I would call is a more photorealistic artwork style. So you have the traditional like cups and wands and pentacles and that kind of thing. And truthfully, like this image, the Six of Wands with the knight on a horse with the wreath is very similar again, and based on the Rider-Waite original drawings, but it's a more photorealistic version of it. So this would be one that stays somewhat true to the overall feel of the original tarot deck. But in the original tarot deck, you don't have these fantasy creatures like a mermaid, and you don't see like, it's just more, it's just a different art style, but it's still very beautiful. And like, look at Temperance. That's so gorgeous. I feel like it stays pretty true overall to the traditional meanings of the cards, but just with a totally different style of artwork. So that is the Witch's Tarot by Ellen Dugan. You have all, if you've been around with me for a while, you've all seen this particular deck, which again has one of the best guidebooks, as well as the website for this is one of the best I've ever seen. But this is the Light Seers deck. And I will try to link all of these for you down below in case you're interested in checking. A lot of them are out on Amazon. Some of them are not going to be. But to me, this is one of the most beautiful, like colorful, just easy to understand sort of modern references of a tarot deck. And I love it. Like this, if you're looking for a deck that you can read intuitively, but that is also more diverse, that has more modern type of imagery, I think this one is such a good one because this one has so much like symbolism that I think we can relate to. So she's got these wands pointing at her, but she's very grounded and she's inside a bubble that looks kind of like she's on her meditation mat. So I feel like you can tell very easily that this is a card about staying grounded and understanding who you are, even in the midst of people attacking you or outside things that are trying to break through your peace. And for me, that is one of the most powerful parts of tarot, is when you can pull a card and you intuitively connect to the images in it and you feel like you can see something that is like confirmation of what you know you've been going through and what you know you need to do. I need to get grounded. I need to pray. I need to meditate. I need to make sure that I'm keeping myself safe amidst all of this chaos. And for me, that's something that is just the most valuable part of the tarot. So hopefully you guys can kind of see some of this imagery. I love it. One of my favorites. Top 5 favorite Light Seers Tarot deck. This is the deck that I will be giving away for you. It is already ordered and on the way to me, and I will be shipping it out to one of you. So don't forget to head over to sarracannon.com and click on the blog to enter all the giveaways, because that deck will be included in today's giveaway. So one of the main websites that I like to go to, like all of these tarot decks will have a booklet that tells you what the cards mean. But there's also a lot of websites that work as companions. So Labyrinthos is one of my favorites. And the other one that I use a lot is Biddy Tarot. And if you search for Four of Wands or the Tower Tarot card, Biddy Tarot will likely come up as the first or second or third result on a Google search because it's one of the most commonly used sites. I think they have an app. She has courses. She has a planner. And she also came out with her own tarot deck. So I had to grab it. It is a wider tarot deck than a lot of the others. So if you look at the size comparatively, it's not as tall, but it's wider. And sometimes I feel like that is helpful in actually like mixing up your cards, because you don't have to have as big of hands, because when you have really long cards, you have to have longer width from your finger to your thumb. But when the cards are a little bit shorter, but they keep the artwork wider, it's a little easier to manage. So if you have smaller hands, this might be a good deck for you. I also love the purple foiling on the sides. And these cards are, again, the imagery is based on the original Rider-Waite traditional tarot imagery, but instead of being so detailed, it's a more minimalist sort of design, and the colors are kind of the same color scheme throughout with this sort of green and blue and purple, and it's really quite pretty. So I have enjoyed this deck as well. And again, there's a nice booklet that comes with it, but you'll get a lot if you go to biddytarot.com, and her website has a ton of great resources for learning the cards. These next 3 are kind of in a category together in a way. So these are sort of modern fandom type cards, and you could probably find a lot more than what I have here. So this is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer deck, which is one of my newest decks. There's a Hocus Pocus deck and a Nightmare Before Christmas. So these two Disney decks, they're really nice, pretty artwork, but I feel like the guidebook that comes with them is terrible. I don't like any of these guidebooks that come with these types of ones because I feel like they just don't connect for me. I don't like them. But if you're a fan of this type of Jack and Sally, and again, these cards all use something slightly different than the traditional names of pentacles and so on. So instead of wands, they use candles, and instead of swords, they use needles. And for me, this is not the type of deck that I would use if I were a beginner, because it's going to be difficult. Like, you can't Google what does the 4 of needles mean or the 6 of needles mean, because needles is not a traditional term for swords. So you would just need to constantly kind of be like, what is the needles? Oh, it's a sword. Let me look what 6 of swords means. But the artwork is really beautiful. And of course it comes from the show. Like, that's a great full card, but you can see how the full card is very different from like the traditional full card. So this for me is more of a collector style deck than it is like a deck that I would read from a lot, but it's still really nice. My warning there is oh, and look at how cool the back is. Kind of reminds me of Haunted Mansion a little bit. My thought to you is, if you are wanting to truly learn how to read tarot, I would not start with one of these type of like themed fandom decks. I would start with a deck that is made to be a tarot deck, less than to be like a fandom type deck. So just to show you, very similar type of booklet here. And again, instead of the traditional terms, they use like lightning and pumpkins and stuff like that for the suit names. So here's what the back of the cards look like. And then each of the cards is sort of outlined in this green color. And so for me, it's like I see pumpkins and I'm kind of like, what is that even? I think they mean pentacles, but I don't feel like the guidebook does a great job of sort of putting those things together. Candles is obviously, again, going to be wands because that's fire, but some of these I just feel like aren't the best imagery. They're just cool if you like Hocus Pocus, if that makes sense. But you can tell they're kind of still stuck together because I took kind of 1 week of using them and then I've never used them since. So not my favorite decks, although they are cool. So my most recent sort of fandom tarot purchase is the Buffy the Vampire Slayer deck. And this one I will say I like better than these other 2 Disney decks. And I love the back of these, like the colors in these cards with the purple and red is really stunning. And I do like the imagery on these cards. And of course, it's really pulling from the characters that you get to know in the series. And it will tell you in the guidebook kind of who it's referring to on the cards if you don't recognize. Like, obviously we've got Buffy and Faith here. So there's just some really cool imagery on this if you're a fan of Buffy. And I feel like these cards stay a little bit more true in their artwork to the original. So like you've got the Ace of Stakes, which is the same as the Ace of Wands, or is it Swords? See, that's where I kind of am like, wait, which? Stakes looks like a wand, but I think they mean for that to be swords. But then I'm like, wait a minute. This is why I don't like it when they change it. I wish they would just leave it the same. So this is actually called Pentacles, and then Chalices is Cups, but Stakes I think might be, okay, Stakes are Wands, and then Scythes are Swords. But when they change stuff up like that, it kind of messes with my brain a little bit, and I wish they would just stay true to the like OG, but the cards themselves are really good. But again, the guidebook is more kind of like snarky and stuff, and I didn't feel like it has a lot of the same traditional meanings as a traditional tarot deck. So for me, these are not, they're like novelties, but not really part of my daily sort of practice. Another deck that I adore, but that I don't feel like has a really wonderful guidebook that comes with it, and it's hard to read from, is this True Black Tarot. Now, this is not one that you can get on Amazon. These are hand painted. It was probably the most expensive deck that I have in my collection. And there are things about the guidebook on this one that I really do love in terms of what it says about the mythology and the meanings behind some of the embossed images on here, but there are also problems with it. I don't have it to show you because it's in my bedroom and I forgot to grab it, but you can see the beauty of hand painted, sort of glossy or glittery edges, and then the sort of embossing and hand painted foiling that has gone on these cards. So here's like the starter card. These were expensive and they only released so many at a time, but they do have just incredible imagery. Now this again is almost like all the characters are kind of like naked and androgynous. They are all, I believe, like almost like very white skinned, almost like alabaster white, as if they were statues, but not every one has a person on it. Some of them have rats, or some of them have glasses or candles, or, you know, other things like that. But this is one that I've really loved. Now the feel of this deck is very matte. Where I have a problem with this deck though, is because the cards are so thick to accommodate these beautiful edges, it can be really difficult to shuffle them, because they're very thick and it's like they're super thick. And so if you have small hands, this might be a difficult deck for you to actually shuffle. If you want to shuffle it in a traditional sense, you can always just shuffle like this too if you want. But these cards are really stunning in terms of the beauty of the artwork. And then you can see down sort of embossed here at the bottom, it tells you what the card is. So Ace of Cups, the 10 of Wands, the King of Swords. None of them directly have like blood, but they'll use these roses kind of as a blood sort of thought. But you've got a lot of gold, a lot of red, cracked cups. Like there's some really beautiful artwork in here. Again, this is called the True Black Tarot, and I will see if I can find a link to their website. It took me months to get this tarot deck, and I have used it quite a bit. But again, there are a few challenges with this deck as well. This one is also one that I have used a lot. This is, hopefully you can see, very different from my other tarot decks in that it's all black and white. And this is called the Hermetic Tarot, which is part of the like Order of the Golden Dawn. And this one has a lot more to each card in terms of the symbols on it. So like each card has like lots of different symbols, mythology, like lore, legends, a lot of other things that are built in. And this one does come with it's a pretty small kind of booklet. And again, I'm not sure where I have it right now, that explains to you all of the different symbols that are on these cards. But this, again, I would not necessarily call a good starter deck, just because you've got a lot of the cards that look very similar, and it can be difficult to really distinguish what's the difference between the 3 of Swords and the 5 of Swords, because the cards look the same, except there's 2 more swords in this one. So like this 7 of Swords doesn't really tell you a lot. It's beautiful imagery, but if you don't understand all of the symbols on this, you might not understand what the 7 of Swords is, except that at the bottom it says Lord of Unstable Effort. So you might be like, okay, 7 of Swords is unstable effort. What does that mean? And so you would, like, when I was using this deck and first really learning to use it, I had to look up the meanings of cards a lot more often than I do with something like this, because when I see this imagery, I can kind of tell a little bit what this means. Like, this is a happy family and there's lots of pentacles here, so this means abundance and wealth. But on a card like this, I might not be able to tell the same thing because the imagery is just less clear at first glance with some of it. So like, see here, it's like the 10 of Pentacles here versus the 10 of Pentacles that you just saw. There's no happy family here. It's just, it looks very similar to the 9 of Pentacles, except there's 10 of them. And then it also has this Lord of Wealth. So I can get the idea that it's abundance, but it's just not as clear in terms of reading it for my own, like, trying to learn the cards for the first time. But this is a card, for some reason, emotionally, I have felt very connected to, and I'm not even sure why or how in so many ways, but there have been a lot of things about the symbols on here that have connected with me at various times in my life. So this is another cherished deck, but not one that I would recommend to beginners. Finally, in terms of tarot decks that I have to show you, this is another one that is kind of more of a fandom slash, it's not really fandom, but it's more of like a fun deck and less of a learning deck. And this is the Kawaii Tarot. But I will say, in terms of if you have small hands that you're not sure how to that you can hold stuff. This is a very small deck, so it would be very good for smaller hands or if you have like a teenager who's learning how to read. And this is called the Kawaii Tarot deck. And they do have, I think, multiple decks similar to this that they have published, but there's almost nothing on here that's going to tell you what this card means. So this is definitely something that you would either rely heavily on the book that came with it, or you would need to already know the tarot, or you would just use them for learning in the first place. But like, here's the 10 of Pentacles or 10 of Wands, because it's got like the 10 little lollipops, but that tells me nothing intuitively about what this means because there's no other imagery other than lollipops on here. So not a very good like intuitive card reading, but if you're already familiar, it's still a fun card set to read from. And it's super cute because there's just like little kawaii characters. There's lollipops. The tower is so not menacing. And you've got these little like chocolate coins and stars and little cups and things like that. So it's really cute. But again, it's not going to give you a lot of clues as to the meaning. And I find like if you're just learning tarot, it's so much more valuable. Oh, I do have one more. It's so much more valuable to have a deck that can help you along so that instead of having to look up the meaning, you can tell what it means just because of the imagery. Like we can see this King of Swords and we can see that he looks confident and that he's very decisive and he has the sword pointed to part of his plan. Like we can discern from the image itself what this card means, whereas we can't really do that with a lollipop. So this is another card deck that is from an indie producer, an artist named Keely L. And I cannot for the life of me, as I'm staring at it, remember the name of this. So I will put it on the screen or link it for you down below. But she is an artist, and this is another kind of feminine interpretation deck. And again, a little bit less on the actually telling you what each of these things mean. But I just really love, first of all, the pink cards. And second of all, I just love her artwork. And it's just been a really fun deck. I feel like every time I turn the cards over, there's another one turned the other way. So you've got the cups pouring into each other. You've got some really interesting women, at 7 of Wands, just different things like that. But remember I showed you that 7 of Wands from the Light Seer where she's in her bubble and like the wands are pointed towards her. This is a very different vibe. And I feel like the other one that has the more human imagery is just an easier card to read. So just an idea. This one has a lot of like black cats and just line drawings, and it's just nothing but black and white and pink. So to me, this is a very aesthetic deck and I have really enjoyed it. And that is also supporting kind of a small business, small creator. So that is really nice to do as well. So that is my tarot collection. I'm going to just briefly show you the boxes of the Oracle collection that I have, and then I'm going to tell you what my recommendation would be if I were to recommend like a starter tarot deck. So I have the Moonology cards, and then I also have the Moonology Manifestation Oracle cards. And again, just to show you, well, I'll show you this literary, which is Oracle, to show you a difference between tarot and Oracle. Again, they all come with guidebooks that will tell you. This literary oracle is all historical literary fiction authors. So you have like Sappho, Agatha Christie, and then you do have some animals like the peacock and things like that. Flannery O'Connor, a book, Emily Bronte, a moon, Mary Shelley, and so on. So you have kind of a mix with regular cards and then these historical authors. And so this is very different from like 2 of Wands or different suits. And you can use this to, you know, do the same type of readings that pull from your intuition, but it's just going to be a very different process. But when you pull the card, then you can look up what does it mean? And then they give you some examples of how you can read those cards and what types of readings you can do. So I have the Moonology cards, the literary, which is Oracle. I have the Gospel of Aradia. And then I have a couple of Gabby Bernstein's sort of affirmation cards. These are less sort of oracle cards as they are sort of like affirmations. In stillness, I receive. When I'm connected to spirit, I feel a sense of certainty, magnitude, and ease that I've never known before. Just kind of like sayings that can make you feel better based on some of her teachings as Gabby Bernstein. So then I have this one called the Mystic Sisters. And this one is, again, you can see like goddess, matcha, Thea, Tuatha De Danann. So you've got different types of things here, witch's brew, Amunet. So you've got different figures, I guess, here. And then you can go into these mythical goddesses and sisters and see what they mean. So when you pull Persephone, here's what it means about her. And this can be a great way, again, to sort of learn about history. So there's that Kuan Yin, again, that we saw from the other deck. So you've got some of these more mystical goddesses from different traditions around the world. And then it tells you some ways that you can read these cards. Another great way to use your tarot, by the way, is if you follow different hashtags or search for different hashtags on places like Instagram, and you can see people that are sharing their readings for specific new moons or full moons and different things like that. Like there's an account I follow on Instagram called Owl and Bones Tarot, and they always have a different reading up on their Instagram for every full moon and every new moon. And I find that the questions that they ask are really just becoming another tool for me to learn more about myself and my own feelings and get in touch with my own emotion and my own desires and my own gratitude and the places where I need to work on myself so that I can become a better person. And to me, that's not a controversial thing at all. It's just part of growth. And for me, that's exactly what tarot is a tool for growth, for personal journey, and for learning to love myself, learning to understand myself better, and learning to understand where it is I'm trying to go in my life. So I hope that you enjoyed this look at my tarot deck. I know this was a bit longer of a premiere video than what we've had so far in the Spooktacular, but if you loved this and you would like to know more about how I learned to read tarot and giving you some tips on how to read tarot and how I use it, there are also, one of the other questions that I get a lot is, do I use tarot in my writing? And I don't use tarot typically in my writing. I think it scares me a little bit because it makes me feel like I wouldn't be in control, but that really doesn't make a lot of sense because I said it's coming from my own intuition. So maybe I should use it more often using tarot. Let me know if you're a writer and you use tarot in your writing and if you enjoy that. And also if you want to see more videos talking about tarot and how to actually read tarot cards, let me know for that. If I had to give you 2 or 3 decks that would be starter decks that I feel like would be really helpful to learn on, the ones that I would recommend are the Light Seers deck, which again is part of today's giveaway, the Everyday Witch Tarot, which I really, really love, and the Universal Golden Tarot, which is this one here that I absolutely love as well. There also is a tarot that I don't have anymore because I gifted it to someone when I was in San Diego called the Modern Witch Tarot. And the Modern Witch Tarot is another one that also is kind of easy to read as a beginner and is also more modern, and it is more diverse. If you're looking for more diverse skin colors and types of women on your cards, that can be another good option for you. So I will link some of those down below, but definitely let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And that is it for the next day of our Spooktacular. Tomorrow we will be back for another daily noon reading, another daily noon live, and then in the afternoon, another premiere as I read a book and share with you my thoughts as a reader and a writer on the book Bunny. And so we're going to have a fun time. So let's keep this Spooktacular going. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you're new to me, come hang out in our coven. All the links will be down below. All right. I will see you in my next one. Bye.